The picture of anti-Semitism in South Africa has been quite different from other English-speaking countries. That the number of physical incidents of anti-Semitism, so harassment or violence directed at Jews, has been very, very low in South Africa into the present. And there are a variety of different potential explanations for this, but some of it relates to the multicultural nature of South Africa after 1994, after South Africa became a properly independent and democratic country. And Jews felt very welcome in South Africa, in the new South Africa, and were welcome in the new South Africa. And some of this has changed since October the 7th, 2023, that there had been a fair amount of anti-Zionism in South African society, that the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement was very active in South Africa, but the South African government had tried to be somewhat even-handed when it came to matters relating to Israel. And I think what has been a great shock to the Jewish community over the last year is the emergence both of very, very open anti-Semitism and also a broader climate where almost anything goes when it comes to Israel. The South African Jewish community is a very Zionist community. We collect data on exactly this, that attachment to Israel is very, very strong within this community. And we've seen the community feel very, very uncomfortable and in fact, in some cases, quite directly threatened since October 7th. Again, the number of episodes of violence and of physical acts of anti-Semitism remains low, but the community is very, very uncomfortable and has been made to feel very uncomfortable over the last year. As part of this collaboration, we have looked at a variety of different forms of social media in South Africa, and really the platforms which are most popular in South Africa. So we've looked at Facebook, we've looked at Twitter, we've looked at TikTok as well. And for this project, which built on a existing project which we've been running for a number of years, with this project we looked specifically at anti-Semitism. Our previous work had looked at anti-Semitism, but also at racism and xenophobia on social media. And in this case, what we did is we had teams of annotators, of researchers, who spent a number of months looking at a variety of community sites for evidence of discourse, of conversation, rhetoric relating to Jews. And going back, in many cases, going back to October 7th, sometimes going even before October 7th as well, to see what was said on these sites, which are not sites relating to Israel or directly, in many cases, sites relating to Jews anyway. What was the tone of conversation? What was said? What were the themes which recurred? So we did this in two separate batches with these researchers really targeting different platforms, but also then targeting very particular sites as well. So looking, for example, at the pages of some political parties, looking at community and neighborhood groups, looking at social groups on these sites to try and get a sense of what was being said about Jews on these sites. What we've been very struck by is the appearance of classic, really quite old forms of hostility towards Jews. So some of it, for example, the recurrence of references to the protocols of the Elders of Zion, for example, references to tropes connected with the blood libel, comparing Jews with insects and rodents, things of this kind, which are really throwbacks to older forms of anti-Semitism, which certainly I think we've been struck by the occurrence of these very, very crude forms of anti-Semitism. I think what is perhaps even more common than that is the normalization of a variety of tropes, particularly those connected with Jews and money, and the sense that the Jews are using money to blackmail, in conspiratorial ways, that there's a sort of Jewish conspiracies at work, that Jews are using money for power. And I think that trope we see both on social media, but also we see in supposedly respectable forms of the popular press as well, that this has become acceptable within South African society, and certainly I think has, after October 7th, that ideas which were present before October 7th have now been surfaced and are now people use this way of thinking very, very openly. So I think we've been struck by those two things, both traditional, very violent, very crude anti-Semitism, which has bubbled to the surface, but then also the normalization of particular rhetoric around about money and Jews, which is we see both on social media and within the broader society. One of the other features we've been very struck by is how much on social media a direct connection is made between Jews and Israel, and how particularly the use of the term Zionist and Zionism in many, many cases is meant to refer to Jews. And there's, I think, a sense amongst social media users, and I think more broadly within society, that you can get away with saying pretty much anything about Zionists. In the South African case, where the Jewish community, most of the Jews in South Africa are self-described Zionists, this is a major problem, but also the ways in which this terminology is being used on social media as well is really not making a distinction. That people claim, oh, I'm really just talking about Zionists, I'm really just talking about Israel. In reality, if you look closely at what's being said, that this is often just nothing more than crude anti-Semitism. So how has the South African Jewish community felt in terms of its safety and in terms of its future in South Africa since October 7th? I think October 7th, and particularly its aftermath, has been tremendously disruptive and shocking to this community. It's a community which had really bought into a narrative after 1994 that Jews were part of the broader society and were accepted in the broader society. And I think that this has been, there's been a genuine crisis within South African Jewry, and it's been expressed quite directly that the one national South African Jewish newspaper, for example, ran a very unusual opinion piece by the chair of the board of the newspaper, someone who quite a figure of widely known within the Jewish community, who argued quite directly that South African Jews should leave South Africa, that this was a sign that the International Court of Justice application by the South African government and that other rhetoric, again, particularly about Israel and about Zionism, that this was a sign that Jews did not have a future in South Africa. That, I think, some of that has calmed down since, but certainly this is a community on edge, and where Jewish institutions, which have always had, or at least for the last number of decades, have always had considerable security outside, and now to the nth degree, that schools and synagogues and otherwise will have very, very visibly armed guards, not just outside the building, but around the building. And this is something new for this community, a real sense of unease and uncertainty about the future.